ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I hope you're all getting your week started off in the correct way. It's been a little bit since I've recorded a talk, but this topic has been brewing for a while, and recent developments have actually made it even more severe. And so I feel like there's no better time than now to talk about today's topic, which is Capcom. Now, Capcom has always been one of the most important companies in the fighting game community, going all the way back to the beginnings of the fighting game community and the competitive fighting game scene. Capcom has always been there. We talk about Street Fighter, we talk about Marvel vs. Capcom. They've always had a very, very important place within the scene, within the community, and that can't really be understated. They've always been relevant. Their games have always been some of the biggest amongst fighting game lineups. And so there are a few different things that arise as a result of this. Some are very positive and some are very negative. The positive being, we can count on them to put out a game of a certain accepted quality year in and year out. Now, obviously, people will disagree or have arguments over certain installments of Street Fighter, certain installments of Marvel, this and that. That doesn't really matter. The fact of the matter is, Capcom is a very big company, even outside of Street Fighter, and so they have the money and they have the resources to keep putting out these high-quality fighting games year in and year out. I don't think anyone would disagree on that notion, and most would also just accept the fact that Capcom does put a lot of work, or the Capcom team does put a lot of work into their products. Whether that work is in the avenues that people want them to be or not, it's a different story, but they do put in the work, right? Street Fighter 6's launch was probably the best launch of any fighting game we've ever seen. It has a lot of things going for it. It has great netcode, has a ton of player base. It's doing very well. And so I don't want that to be swept under the rug when we have this conversation. However, unfortunately, as a result of Capcom being so big and being so kind of grandfathered into like the roots of our community, I think it kind of opens the door for complacency in a way where they know that they're always going to be relevant, and they know that there's a certain amount of the fighting game community relies on them to bring certain things to the table. And so sometimes I think they exercise a disconnect from the community that they're supposed to be catering to, and there can kind of be a misdirection where they don't really understand where they should take certain decisions or what way they should steer, because to them, they're trailblazers. They're in the front, and so wherever they go, a lot of people will follow, right? And that will kind of factor into some of the things that I cover during this talk, but that's just kind of the groundwork. So obviously, Viper, returning character. And if you existed on fighting game Twitter at all, you would know that reception to Viper has been very, very positive, especially as a character that existed in Street Fighter 4. And many were concerned that with the modernization of fighting games, that she would be really watered down and lack some of the mechanics that made her special. But now, having seen the trailer, overwhelming majority of the response to her, both on the design end, from the aesthetic end, to the actual gameplay elements that we saw in the trailer, it's really positive, right? And so that's cool. Everyone was kind of hype on Capcom, hype on Viper, looking forward to it. And so I feel like they kind of earned some of the good graces of the community by handling it in this way. And then they turn around and they make some really, really awful decisions that we'll cover later. But before we get to that, before we get to the most recent development, I want to tell you guys why Capcom and their decision making has such a large impact on the fighting game ecosystem as a whole. Their decisions do not just affect their bottom line, right? That is something that they prioritize. Obviously, it's a company. They want to make money. They want to monetize. They have shareholders to appeal. They have all that, right? But their decisions actually make huge waves within the fighting game community. And so we're going to give you some examples of that. So first of all, as I said before, and now I can do this, right? Capcom owns and runs the biggest fighting game. Street Fighter 6 is by far the largest fighting game. You know, people have arguments about what are the big three of fighting games and this and that, right? It's actually not a big three. It's actually just a big one. Street Fighter 6 is so far ahead of every other game that it's like not even close. Like even the next biggest game, which is Tekken, right, is nowhere in the same realm of Street Fighter 6. It is by far the largest and most popular fighting game. It's not close. For example, right, and to add on to this, right, it's not even just us, right? One of the things that's so interesting about Street Fighter in comparison to other games is their presence in Japan, right? And that's like where a lot of this comes from. Is Street Fighter is so massive in Japan, it's like no other fighting game even matters, right? It is so far and away the forefront of people's attention in Japan that like no other fighting game really exists to them. To demonstrate that, right, this is the World Warrior, right? This is the World Warrior. This is their online online circuit component of the Capcom Cup, right? If you do well enough in World Warriors, you can earn a slot into Capcom Cup. Now, if you scroll through here, you'll see there's plenty of events from all over the world. We see France, we see Germany, we see US Midwest, and they have some decent entrants for an online event, right? 145 players, that's pretty big. 57, 66. But if we keep scrolling and we keep scrolling, we eventually will stumble across the Japan World Warrior, which you will notice is nowhere in the same realm. 2,360 players. This is what I mean by this is not close. Like this is not a dynamic that exists anywhere else in the world. Nowhere in the world is even getting close to Japan's interest in Street Fighter, and that contributes to why Street Fighter is by far the biggest fighting game, right? It's like not even close, right? 2,000 entrants. A lot of these events struggle to even hit 100. Some of them do break it, and like I said, those are pretty sizable events, but we're talking about quad digits over there in Japan, and that should really hammer the point home, right? That should hammer this particular point home. It's like not the same dynamic as other fighting games at all. No other fighting game has this severe of a divide, right? It just doesn't exist. It's only Street Fighter, right? Okay, next. Right, we go to Evo, right? We go to open tournaments. So you're saying, you know what? Let's not even talk about Street Fighter. Let's involve some of the other games, right? And we go to the attendees list here. If StarGG wants to cooperate with me, maybe. Oh, maybe they don't. We're cooked. We're cooked. They don't want to show me, bro. That's crazy. That's okay. We can do it this way. So 4,242 entrants for Street Fighter. Next biggest was Tekken, indeed, which 2,555, right? So about 1,700 player difference from one game to the next highest game. Again, Street Fighter by far the biggest. Has the record. Street Fighter 6 has the record for the most entrants for a single game at Evo period, at over 7,000 entrants on its first year, right? It's just, these are things that are important, right? And this is why this is so important for us to be critical of Capcom, because they are so far ahead that they might think we can just do whatever we want, right? We can just do whatever we want because we're by far the biggest. So what the fuck is going to happen? What's the worst that's going to happen to us, right? But that's why it becomes even more critical. So big thing, right? And the reason that I even wanted to do this talk in the first place is to talk about Capcom Cup and how the way that they have brought Capcom Cup into the fighting game community and how it exists kind of has negative impacts on the fighting game ecosystem as a whole. What do I mean by that? Okay, let's go next. Okay, Capcom Cup. So the new era of Capcom Cup started with Capcom Cup 10, right? And this was the first Capcom Cup that they used this marketing strategy of we're gonna be the $1 million tournament, right? They, on their advertising, said there was over $2 million in prizing, and $1 million of that $2 million was going to go to first place at Capcom Cup X, right? Capcom Cup 10. This is where it started. Now, many in the fighting game community rejoice. Oh my God, there's actual like good money in fighting games now. Oh man, we all have something to fight for. This is so cool. This has never been done before. And they were right to some extent, right? This had not been done before, right? No one has ever won $1 million on a fighting game tournament. Like that just hasn't happened, right? Before this point. However, the execution here was very lackluster for a few different reasons. But the main thing is that you have a $1.7 million prize pool. As you can see, this is for Capcom Cup alone. And because you're giving $1 million to first place, the impact that it has on the rest of the players in the tournament is actually pretty low, all things considered, which is really sad to say considering they have the money to like spread this in a way that would actually impact everyone. So if we scroll down and we look at the splits here, you got Uma winning $1 million for first place, Chris Wong winning 300K. Like 300K is cool. 300K is cool. Gotch-kun winning 200K, NL winning 100K. Now it kind of stops there, right? The good payouts kind of stop at fourth place. If you're not top 4, then your payout is really not much to speak of. Like some would say, you know, getting 10,000 for fifth is like reasonable, but in my opinion, if you just didn't pay first place $1 million, you could take a lot of that and give it to some of these guys down here, especially those at the bottom that are only making 2K for qualifying for Capcom Cup, which qualifying for Capcom Cup is extremely hard to do. Like Street Fighter 6, it's not only the biggest game, but the level of competition for this game is absurdly high. It's so hard to qualify for Capcom Cup, right? Only 48 people qualify, and it is very, very difficult to do so. Right? And so for you to qualify and only make 2K, yeah, sure, maybe you didn't win a set at Capcom Cup, but it's Capcom Cup. There are many people on any given day that could go to Capcom Cup and not win a set because the level of talent is just that high. For example, you can see some of the people that got last in this first Capcom Cup. Ending Walker. Ending Walker is definitely one of the best players on the planet, easily. This is a person that could win majors, right? But he got last place at Capcom Cup, right? This could happen to like anyone. If you're just not performing up to the standard on that particular day, it can happen to anyone. And so I don't think that it should be nearly as punishing to only make 2K, especially as an international player. And let's say you have a job and you're giving up an entire week, because Capcom Cup is actually an entire week of event now, right? It's not just like, oh, it's just a weekend and then you go home. It's like an entire thing because they involve SFL, there's the LCQ, there's all of that, right? And so like you give up your entire week, you are away from family, you're away from home, you're away from work, and to only make 2K, I think is like absurd, right? Just really, really bad. And unfortunately, they did not learn from their mistake, right? So when the first Capcom Cup happened, I gave them a little bit of leeway because I said, you know, it's the first time that they're doing stuff like this. It's the first time that they budgeted out $1 million plus tournament, $1.7 million, right? Perhaps they just didn't have the feedback. Like maybe they didn't understand what they were doing, right? And they will make it better in the future. Unfortunately, my faith was misplaced, right? I tried to give them the benefit of the doubt and they proved me wrong. And instead of it being better, it actually got worse. Capcom Cup 11, the year after this one that just happened in March, it kept the same $1 million for first place, but the overall prize pool dropped by about $500,000. And since you're not taking it away from first place, where does it come from? Where does the rest of the 500K come from? They took it away from the rest of the people that were participating. And so second place gets even less. Third place gets even less. Fourth place gets even less. And all of it down here, right, is even less. The people at the bottom get 500 less than they did in the first year, right? And so this is just strictly worse. And all of this is because of the idea of we want to crown a fighting game millionaire. It's such a big deal to hand one person $1 million. Even though it has been proven that you could market in this, you could use the same marketing strategy of, you know, $1 million, right? $1 million is a big number and it does turn heads. I'm not gonna argue against that, right? It absolutely does force people to pay attention to your tournament, but it doesn't have to be the first place, right? You get the same marketing impact from saying this is a $1 million tournament as we're handing one person $1 million, right? You actually get the same marketing impact, especially if the people that you're marketing to, like, because marketing is really geared at people that aren't in the know. You people that are watching right now, for the most part, are really ingrained in the fighting game community. You guys know what's up when it comes to prize pools and tournament circuits and this and that. But from the outside looking in, right, if I don't know anything about fighting games, regardless of whether you say, oh, first place gets $1 million, or this is $1 million, $1 million is up for grabs, or $1.7 million is up for grabs at this one tournament, that's going to drive them to pay attention to the tournament, or maybe consider jumping in for themselves when it all comes down to it, right? And so, like, even the people in the top 8, right? Like, we could see fifth place gets 10K and 7th place got 7K at the first Capcom Cup. Even those people that are in top 8 are getting less, right? They get the same 10K for 5th place, but you only get 5K for 7th place instead of 7K. And so instead of taking it from the obvious top heavy entity, which is this $1 million first place, right? They took it away from everyone else, which when you have this much money and you have this much resource, right? Your goal should be creating the biggest impact. And this is advice that I've given to Capcom for free for years at this point. They'll never listen to me, but I think you have a responsibility, especially when you're involved with such a grassroots community such as fighting games, right? You have a responsibility to try to create as much impact as you possibly can. And that goes into marketing as well, right? It markets itself. If someone goes to Capcom Cup and they somehow go 0-2, they qualify for Capcom Cup, right? Regardless of what story there is, and they don't make it out of pools. Let's say they get last pits and pools, but they're still making enough money to make a difference in their lives. That's going to do much better for your marketing than someone only getting $1,500 and saying, well, this is a fucking waste of time, right? Like, this really didn't do anything. I would have made more money sitting at home and just working for that week that I had to miss, right? And that is the case for an overwhelming majority of people, right? Most people are not full-time when we talk about fighting games. So this is really, really important. So them making their prize pool strictly worse, indirectly, of course, like they tried to do the same type of payouts, but they don't have as much money as before, and so it ends up being worse. The reality to us is the same, regardless of the circumstances that they were put into. But again, after they did the first one, after they did the first Capcom Cup with $1 million, they kind of backed themselves into a corner where now that you've said, hey, we're going to hand $1 million to first place, it's hard to go back from that, right? It's hard to go back from that without kind of undermining yourself, because everyone else that's competing in the tournament is going to be like, yo, first place isn't $1 million anymore? Like, that's pretty underwhelming. It was only for the first year. Like, you know, you've put yourself into that situation. And so they feel like it is necessary, right? They feel like it is necessary to keep doing this $1 million first place thing. And so enter the current Capcom Cup, which is the same exact payout as last year. They didn't drop anymore, which they couldn't drop anymore. I don't want anyone to give them brownie points for not dropping down the payout further. They had nowhere else to go, right? If you're going to hand $1 million to one person, you can't drop this payout any more reasonably and actually have a payout for anyone else, right? Unless you want to just do a tournament that's winner take all. If you want to do winner take all and nobody else gets shit, you know, you could do that. I don't recommend it. I think it's a fucking stupid idea, but they've been making really stupid ideas from the jump. So it doesn't really change that much in that regard. So the mission statement of all of this is like, why am I showing you the progression of Capcom? It's because of these two things in tandem. Capcom owning and running the biggest fighting game, and also being the trailblazer in terms of like big circuits, right? There've always been circuits, but no circuits have been as lucrative as this one, right? The prize pools have never been this big before Capcom stepped in and said, hey, we're going to do $1 million, $2 million, or this or that, right? They were the first to do it. And so other companies, right? And this is where I'm going with this. Other companies are going to look to them as a model of what they should do, if they're trying to jump into fighting games. Enter. Next tab. SNK. SNK, an entity. There's not, again, like I said, there's not that many fighting game companies that have as much resource as Capcom does. But SNK actually is one of those companies, being owned by the Saudi Arabian government. They have money. They have money. They don't have to worry about this stuff as much as other companies do. When we talk about like our Arxes and our Bandais and whatnot, like, yeah, they do well for themselves, but are they on the same level? Are they on the same level as the Saudi Arabian government? No, that's not a thing. It's okay. And so SNK says, hey, we were releasing a fighting game, Fatal Fury, City of the Wolves, and we want to run our own circuit. And what did they do? They look at their contemporaries. They look at the competition, so to speak. They might look at it as competition. And they're like, how do we do our circuit bigger and better, right? How do we do it better than the current leader, so to speak, which would be Capcom Cup. Capcom is the biggest circuit. It is the one with the most money so far. How do we outdo that, right? Okay, so what do? They run their own SWC, which is very, very, very similar in format. They have less players. They have 32 instead of 48. This is actually coming up pretty soon, next month at the end of October. And as you will notice, they kind of follow the same, the really familiar structure when we talk about payouts here, where $1.5 million, it's not just $1 million, it's $1.5 million goes to first place, and the overall prize pool is $2.5 million, right? And so we have the same exact dynamic where it's first place and then a massive fucking drop off for second place and beyond. And again, I want to bring up the fact that doing this is not fair to players. I think it is dog shit in general, but I think it's really unfair to players to say that the value of one single set, the difference between winning a tournament and getting second place is $1.2 million. It does not make any fucking sense, right? It's just, it's like borderline, it's inhumane. Like this is something that like, I'm not exaggerating. This is some shit that would really fuck up someone's mental. Like, honestly, like imagine the mental stress of playing in this set for $1.2 million and you lose, right? You'll never forget it. And I think that's really messed up. And that's one of the reasons that I think like doing this is nonsense. And you don't have to do this either. You don't have to do this at all. The only reason that they do this is because they're like, we want to be better than Capcom. We want to beat Capcom at their own game. And so we're competing for who has the shittiest payouts. And so SWC has the crown now because somehow they managed to have more money than even the first Capcom Cup. Which first Capcom Cup had about 1.8 million, right? They have 2.5 million, and somehow their payouts managed to be worse. They managed to be worse. I don't know how you could work this out and think that this is a good idea. It's so dog shit. This is really bad. And this is only a result. If Capcom had better splits for their original Capcom Cup, this wouldn't happen. I promise you. The only reason that this payout structure exists because they want to outdo Capcom. That is it. That is it. That is the only reason that this exists in this capacity. Right. And so this is what I mean by Capcom's decisions have such big impacts even outside of their own ecosystem, right? Other companies do and will look to them for what to do in these situations. And so we're stuck with a bunch of circuits that feel like they should be life-changing for a ton of players, but in reality, it's only life-changing if you place top 6 or in Capcom Cup sense, top 4. Right? That's dog shit. That's terrible. You've lost the plot. You've lost the plot at this point. Why not change everyone's lives that qualify? Make it so people feel compelled and they feel rewarded for putting time into your game and spending all that time practicing and spending time traveling to events here and there. Because that's another thing about fighting games is like most of these players that compete, they're out of pocket, bro. They're out of pocket traveling internationally for a chance to qualify for these tours. And their reward for that is 2K? 2K? That's what you're telling me? When there's 2.5 million in the pot? Come on, man. That is absurd. Absolutely absurd. And it's dog shit. And it's Capcom's fault. It's Capcom's fault. I'm not going to absolve SNK of all blame either, but they literally just tried to copy paste what Capcom did. If Capcom did it better, then we wouldn't be looking at this situation. Right. So that's why it matters. Going further, right? And as time has gone on, right, the fighting game community has become more and more centered around circuits, right? People want to talk about like fighting games have changed and, you know, the games are so different and they're so much easier and I hate accessibility and this and that. And like, I don't even think that that's the biggest thing with modern fighting game community. I think the biggest shift by far has been our focus on circuits, right? Circuits are everything in fighting games right now. It really feels like if your event is not on the Capcom Pro Tour, if it's not on EWC, or if it's not on the SNK Tour, if it's not on the Arc World Tour, you're really left by the wayside, and there's not that much resource, and there's not that much attention, and people just kind of don't give a fuck in a lot of cases if it doesn't have that like badge of legitimacy associated with it. And so Esports World Cup factors into this too, because funny enough, even though Esports World Cup in the eyes of many people would be the most external of all three, like if you put Capcom Cup, if you put SNK World Championship, and you put Esports World Cup, like most people would say Esports World Cup is the one that is like the outsiders, right? They're kind of like outside of the community coming in and like just throwing money at it, right? That's what Esports World Cup is trying to do, right? That's their mission statement. However, the unfortunate part of this is that even though that is the case, Esports World Cup actually has the best payout structure of all of them, and it's not even close, because again, even though they have $1 million up for grabs for Street Fighter 6, they actually only give first place 250K, and I'm saying only, but like 250K is still a lot of money. It's still a lot of money. And we see that as we go further down, even the people that aren't making top 8 are still getting 20K. We're still getting 15K. We're still getting 10K, right? This matters. This matters. And they could do better as well, by the way. I'm not saying that they're like, I still think like down here should be more, right? But this is kind of what I'm getting at, that you should make the good payouts deeper, right? So that the people that go through the slog of having to qualify for these extremely hard circuits and tournaments actually feel rewarded, and they feel like, okay, you know, maybe they could take some of that money and put it towards the flights and the hotels and all that it's going to take for the next tour, right? You winning 1.5K is not going to do anything for you, right? That's like maybe one tournament. That's maybe, depending on where you're at and your proximity to them. So somehow Esports World Cup actually understood the concept of, yeah, we can market using $1 million, but that doesn't mean we have to give it all to one person, right? And as we can see, even these circuits are like intertwined now, where the winner of East WC goes to Capcom Cup and this and that. Like these are linked. These are linked in ways, and that's what I mean by like the community has become more and more focused on circuits as time has gone on. And somehow out of all of this, even though Capcom has been in the fighting game community and making games for the fighting game community for longer than most of us have been around, the overwhelming majority of you, but I don't know how many people watch me that have been in the fighting game community from the beginning. I certainly wasn't around, but you would think Capcom would be the one that would be the most in touch, right? And the ones that make the best decision on how the fighting game community should be treated, because they've been around for so long. In reality, you're letting an outside entity like EWC step in and run roughshod, to the point where I actually believe many players are going to say, or in their minds, they're going to determine where to put their priorities. And right now, I think it's like almost foolish to not prioritize EWC. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to prioritize Capcom Cup. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to really prioritize SNK World Championship, because you only really make that life-changing amount if you place top 4, whereas you could go to EWC and you could do all right, you could not even make top 8 and still get 20K, and that's a big deal. That's a really big deal. You can make 15K down here and this and that. Like that's your chances for making money in an amount that will actually move the needle is much greater going to EWC than it is to Capcom Cup, than it is to SNK World Championship. And so for that reason, right, many are going to prioritize EWC, and these companies are going to wonder why people don't care as much about their individual circuits, when the answer is looking you in the face. It's very, very clear that these things matter to people, especially when we're talking about individuals that are competing in fighting games. And so they're going to have to get their shit together if they don't want to be taken over, because Esports World Cup is only becoming more and more relevant. They are getting more money, and they're doing an extra thing. They're like doing a second one, essentially. It's like a mini version of Esports World Cup. They have more games involved, not even just fighting games, right? They're adding more fighting games to the lineup as well, because at the beginning it was just Street Fighter and Tekken. Now it's Street Fighter, Tekken, and Fatal Fury, right? Who's to say that they won't consider adding some other bigger fighting games down the line? And so this is what I mean, right? Like, I wouldn't be surprised to see a 2x KO on an esports World Cup. They already have League of Legends. They already have the League of Legends mobile game and all that, right? And so again, you're just letting them, you're opening the door. Like, you're not showing any resistance to this entity taking over the community that you've been a part of for so long, because you're making decisions that are extremely selfish and very short-sighted. And this is why Capcom has to get their shit together, because this shit matters. And it has such bigger implications on the fighting game community as a whole than they might think. And if they don't know that, then they have failed us as a community. That's just straight up, right? Okay, moving on. Going further, right? In comes the latest bit of news. I'm sure a lot of you were waiting for me to talk on this particular issue. So for those of you who are unaware, Capcom announced that Capcom Cup, you know, the biggest event, the biggest fighting game event, or the biggest Street Fighter event of the year, is going to be pay-per-view, meaning that you can't watch it for free. And so there's some things. There's some things here. To monetize this, right? First of all, I want to put it out there that the idea of charging for an event to watch is not dog shit in and of itself. Not in and of itself. The reason why is because fighting games as a whole have a really hard time monetizing for like anything, right? And the reason that we have a hard time monetizing is because of a whole lot of things. IP rights, the method that we use to broadcast to people is free in and of itself. Like, people don't pay for stream access, right? They don't pay for cable. They don't pay for this or that. They don't even pay like streaming things. They don't pay like for Netflix or Peacock or Paramount or don't do any of that. It's always been free, right? And so it's extremely hard for events to monetize in these avenues because things have just always been free. They've been free from the beginning, right? Okay, so where did they go wrong? Where did they go wrong? So first of all, your Capcom Cup. That's the first issue. Your Capcom Cup. You're an event that, again, I just showed you guys, they're putting up $1.2 million per year to Capcom Cup alone, right? They also put a little bit of smaller prize pools to like some of their qualifiers and stuff, but you guys have money. You have it. Like, you do, it's not like you're like this up and comer, like really trying to find your way. You need more resources to do this or that. It's not even just that. You have successful season passes. You have successful costumes. You're putting out a bunch of avatar skins that people are obviously eating up for them to keep coming back. Like, you guys have money, so you don't need to charge people to watch your event. And I think this kind of goes against the philosophy of, we're going to do this $1 million marketing thing, right? As exactly that, like a marketing vessel. We're going to do this so that people from the outside of the fighting game community or outside of the Street Fighter sphere look at us and say, you know what? Playing this game for $1 million sounds dope. Like, it looks like a cool game, and I can win life-changing money on top of that, right? You're selling that idea to people. That's what marketing is. This goes against that, because how many people that aren't already really interested in Street Fighter are going to be willing to pay out of pocket to watch an event? Ask yourself that. It's not that many. It just isn't. This isn't. The only people that would consider paying for this are pretty much hardcore fighting game players and fans already. And so this isn't an effective marketing strategy because you already have them. They're already on the ride. They already understand the importance of Street Fighter. They already understand the importance of Capcom Cup. You're not selling anything to them. You're just burning money at that point because all your marketing dollars went to waste. You're not bringing in any new people here, right? So that's a big problem. That's a big problem. Overall, pay-per-view esports events is an event that could work. It is something that could work. In fact, part of the reason that the esports bubble has kind of burst in the way that it is because things have been free for so long, right? But you will find that it's extremely hard to go from an environment where things are free to where things are not free. That is a cultural pushback that you're going to face severely, right? And you will suffer failures as a result of it, especially if the way that you're doing it is not sensible, right? Is there a way to do this in a way that makes more sense? Yeah, there is. There is. Like, for example, I'm not saying they have to do this, but like, imagine Imagine if it was included with something else that you already were like purchasing in the game or something like that, right? Like if you purchase the season pass of the game, you're already going to buy a DLC character or something. It just comes with your ticket. You don't have to pay for that on top of already giving Capcom your money to play the character or play the new content or this or that. You could do it that way. I'm not saying they should, because I still think that would overall be bad, but that would be better. It'd be better than saying, hey, bro, you give us all this money for all this content year in and year out, and we're going to make you pay for this ticket on top. That's bullshit. So what do I think will be the result of this? So here's the part that I think many are going to miss. And unfortunately, we're in a situation where this is going to work. Unfortunately, this is going to work. Because I think what is going to happen is Japan will pay for this. They care that much about Street Fighter. Street Fighter is so, it's like a fucking Olympic sport over there, right? Like, I think that Japan will pay for this, and everywhere else in the world will probably look to other means, i.e. one person paying for it, and then all of us watching their stream. That's what I will do. I'm willing to put myself out there in legal trouble to do something like that just because I'm trying to take a stand, right? Illegal streaming sites, this and that. There's going to be like that, right? For the rest of the world. I think Japan will pay for it, though. Honestly, I do think that Japan will pay for it. And because Japan will pay for it, I think that they will tout this as a success. Even if they don't get as many as projected, they're going to say, well, the Japanese viewer base and the player base, they paid for it. And that's what we care about more than anything else, because they've exhibited that they care about Japan more than anything else. And so they'll be like, no, this is a success. So we're just going to keep doing this year in and year out. So that's what I think will happen. I would love to be proven wrong, but I think that that's actually the road that we're going down. And so it's tough out here, right? Unfortunately, this is the kind of the point that we're put in. And the baffling thing about this, right? The baffling thing about this is that it doesn't work, right? Pay-per-view doesn't even work for like bigger entities. So if you know anything about physical sports, right, you will know that entities like the UFC or like WWE and stuff like that, like really, really big multi-billion-dollar corporations, like even they are stepping away from pay-per-view model, right? They're just not doing that anymore. Most of it is now on like streaming/broadcast rights, right? Like they partner with a streaming service, and if you subscribe to that streaming service, then you get access to these events as well, right? And the reason that works is because those platforms, those streaming platforms, have other things to offer outside of just that, right? It's not just you paying for just that event. If you want, you can go watch the other shit that they have on the platform, right? That's why it works. That's why it works. Pay-per-view is a really dated, archaic model because you're only paying for one event that you're not participating in person. If you were going, then I think most people would understand, like, okay, I have to pay for a ticket, and this, you know, you're taking up a seat, right? That concept is not foreign to most people. For streaming, it's different because it's like, bro, you're just gating this. Like you especially you've even with the $1 million, you've been free to watch the past 2 years. There's no way that you can convince the viewer base that this is something that needed to happen. Like this is something that is going to jeopardize their bottom line. Right? Like you can't sell that idea to people because it has been free from the jump. If the first year that they did the $1 million, they also made it pay-per-view, it would be much more successful. And I do mean that. Because they would at least be able to hide behind the idea that to make this $1 million happen, we have to charge you guys, right? It can't happen without you, right? But it's not like that. We know that it's not like that. We know that it's not like that because they've been doing it for the past 2 years without charging people, and their payouts have only gotten worse and not better. So for them to keep the payouts the same dog shit that they have been, and we don't see any increase, but you're charging everyone to watch the finals, that's absurd. It just doesn't make sense. That just doesn't make any sense. Like this is a failure to realize the environment that you're in for whoever made this decision. And so that is why I think Capcom is fucking up. And unfortunately, there isn't really an end in sight for their fuck ups. I hope to be proven wrong in the coming days, but there's no signal that leads me to believe that they will see this and be like, you know what? We were wrong to do that. We're just going to shift course. Maybe they will, and that's what we can hope for, but they've been making dumb decision after dumb decision after dumb decision. So what do we do? Right. So that's what I have for you guys. Please continue to stay attentive on topics like this and voice your concern and make your voices heard, or else these companies will just trample on us, and there's nowhere for us to go, right? If we can't trust these companies that have been around to even deliver the bare minimum in terms of, event quality and this and that, we're not going to get anywhere. We're regressing, right? We're supposed to be growing. We're supposed to be pushing forward. These guys are holding us back, straight up. So let me know what you think with a comment below. If you're watching this on demand, and I will be back at the moment we have another topic to talk about. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.